Welcome into episode 375 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, the Bruins defeat the Montreal Canadiens 6-3 on Sunday. The Centennial Game for the Bruins. It marks 100 years to the day from the Bruins' inaugural game as a franchise against the Montreal Maroons back against the Montreal Maroons, at Matthews Arena. And then obviously they played the Montreal Canadiens this time around 100 years later. 6-3 win. Charlie Coyle, 2 goals. Charlie McAvoy, 2 goals. David Pastrnak scored a goal. Cole Koepke with the empty netter. So really, really special occasion all afternoon at TD Garden, Bridget and Scott. A really, really special game. One of those games that you hope the Bruins entertain and pay off the moment for the fans and for everybody that was there. And fortunately, they did just that.
Yeah, they did. And that, kind of leads right into my opening shift, which builds off the Centennial celebration, which was awesome. And all the players were at ice level for it. They're sitting on the bench watching it. And you felt like, okay, this is a game where you cannot come out flat. Like you have to bring it. You have to honor, the legends in the building and the history and all of that. So put some extra pressure on it. And I would say for the most part, the Bruins rose to the occasion. They get the win. They dominated early on, jumped out to a 4-0 lead, scored 3 goals in a minute 10 in the first period. But, it was a reminder of the way the Bruins have to play and like what's expected of them. And you even heard some guys talk about this. Joe Sacco before the game referenced, his childhood Bruins fandom and what he loved about the teams he watched growing up in the late 70s and then throughout the 80s. And he said that they played with passion and they played with emotion and they matched the work ethic of the city. And then you heard like Wayne Cashman say almost like the same exact thing on Nesson during the intermission. And it's like, yeah, that should be like the bare minimum expectation for a Bruins team. And we all know it can't be every night, but for the most part, like that's how you should play, whether you're the most talented team or not. And I think it's very clear that this year's team is not the most talented, and a Stanley Cup might be a pipe dream for them. But you still expect them to bring the effort every night and to play with passion and emotion. And they did on Sunday. And Charlie McAvoy referenced after the game, he said, you shouldn't need that reminder, but sometimes you do. And I think, after a pretty lackluster game on Friday against Pittsburgh, which, we might touch on a little because we haven't recorded since then, the Bruins definitely delivered a much better effort on Sunday.
Brian, did you want to go next? Yours is more related to his than mine is.
Sure. Yeah. So again, we're going to spend some time today talking about what was the meaning behind the game today, and just 100 years of Boston Bruins hockey and all the different eras from. Like they were all honored. The Big Bad Bruins through the Brad Park and Rick Middleton and Terry O'Reilly days, and then you have the Bork and Neely days, and right on through to 2000 to now, which obviously brought back a championship in 2011. Like there was so much to honor, and it is one of those days where you're watching on TV or you're watching at the Garden, and whatever issues fans may have with the current team, or they don't score enough, or this problem or that problem, like we can dissect like the specifics of this year's team, but a day like today, that stuff kind of takes a back seat when you just look at the big picture of the franchise being the oldest US NHL team, and just so much history there, and so many fans and generations have enjoyed watching this team and all that stuff. So that's the most important thing that I took from today. But my opening shift as it pertains to the game specifically is that I know it's the Islanders and I know it's the Canadiens, but twice in the last 3 games, the Bruins find a way to score 6 times in a game. Of course, sandwiched around the game against Pittsburgh that Scott mentioned, where they lose to the lowly Penguins, who have the worst goal differential in the league, and they only score 1 goal, including prolonging their third period scoreless drought at home, which they finally broke that dam today against the Canadiens, which is the last team they scored a goal against in the third period at home. So
way back on October 10th.
Yeah, it felt like it was back in 1924. But yeah. So as Scott mentioned, like there's definitely a talent deficiency on this current Bruins team. However, they're starting to at least find some offense, even if it's against weaker teams. You can't take it for granted when the Bruins themselves have been a weaker team thus far this year.
Yeah, and certainly that's what we'll probably be spending most of the episode on. But I wanted to touch on this before we get into the game, like in detail, because there was another. But we've talked to a million people today. We talked to Willie O'Ree, Chief Bergeron, Ray Bork, but I also had a chance to talk to Gary Bettman in the first intermission. He doesn't talk a lot, or often, I should say. He doesn't talk very often. He said that he had no news to break, so nothing crazy, but obviously we had some Canadian media there from Sportsnet. We had obviously Bruins media and just people asking him questions about certain things that are big picture. And one of the things is the salary cap. So like, I just want to give you a quick synopsis of what he said about that, which was he kept saying slow and steady with like a smirk on his face. And people were like, could you see it being a significant jump up this year? He kept saying, I like slow and steady. So that was certainly an indication of maybe that it's not going to hop up a whole lot this year if you believe him. He said that they haven't talked numbers yet. They're not at that point in the process. Also, maybe that's true. I'm just going to pretend it is for the sake of this and just report what he said. And then the other main thing that I was personally interested in, and I know you guys are as well, the NHL guys going to the Olympics. I am always devastated on when they announce that they're not going. Obviously, that happened the last 2 Olympics. They weren't there. And so obviously they announced that they're going to Italy. And I was like, this is just personally, I needed to know, is like, is this something that you guys are just going to do from now on? Like, is this going to be a longer thing than just the not so distant future? Like, is this going to keep going after that? And he said that because of the way that the players feel about it, and how much they really appreciate going, how much they enjoy competing for their countries, that he sees this being the norm for the foreseeable future. So that's good news to me. If you take him at his word for it. I love watching international hockey. It's going to start with the Four Nations coming up soon here in Boston. And he said tickets are going fast. So if you're listening to this, maybe go online right now and try to buy them if you want to go. But I love international hockey, and this is good news to me. And it was a burning question. Like, I couldn't believe I got to ask Gary Bettman it, because I've been thinking about it this whole time, and then we're face to face, and I'm like, I can finally actually ask the person about like that's making this decision.
Yeah, you had a key phrase in there, which was if you take him at his word, which I don't. I simply do not.
I think I said it.
He has lied plenty in the past, including about the Olympics.
Yes.
Yeah, I told Bridget that I was going to be too busy to go over to that, which I kind of was, but in reality, I was like, I don't want to talk to Gary Bettman, so go for it, Bridget.
I had a burning question, and I know other people.
That's a good question. Like that's legit, because I don't think previously had really committed to much beyond 26. Now, again,
he said for sure the next 2 Olympics is the ones that he was like, okay. Yeah, the next 8 years he kind of laid out.
Yeah, and 34 is in the U.S. in Salt Lake City, so they'll definitely be at that one as well.
So, but he said, like, because of the way the players really care about it, like, to do right by them, you would send them.
When has Gary Bettman ever done right by the players? See, that this is where you absolutely cannot take him at his word, because he does not give a shit about the players at all, period.
Yes, because he also brought up, well, sometimes it logistically comes at a point in the season where it makes things complicated, blah, blah, blah. So,
you're going to make my head, explode just thinking about Gary Bettman.
I'm sorry. I know, one of the comments I got on Twitter was like, Bridget, I know you're just doing your job, but, seeing Gary Bettman's face just ruined my whole day.
So, I don't know. I just think it makes for good listenership. Scott, what's going on with you and Gary Bear? I want to hear about your disdain for him.
Oh, I mean, nothing other than the last 35 years of his commissionership.
Nothing except for everything.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure if there was something specific that. Well, I mean, obviously, yeah. How many lockups have there been under his jurisdiction?
3.
3. So, but as it pertains to that, Bridget, somebody asked him about the current relationship with the NHL, PA, and the NHL, and I don't know what else he would say, Scott, but he did say that it's fine and dandy.
Yeah,
former Mayor Marty Walsh is doing a good job over there, so we'll see.
Yep. Okay, great.
So I think Scott didn't go in the first intermission to talk to Gary because he was going to walk in and do what everyone else does when they see Gary Bettman, and they just go boo. And that was why Scott had to refrain.
I didn't want to be caught on camera with my eyeballs rolling out of my head. So,
yeah. Okay, so guys, do you want to start with should we start with the game, and then we can jump back to some of the Centennial stuff, because I know that's it's probably our responsibility to talk about the game first. So, Charlie Coyle has goals in back-to-back games, 3 goals in his last 2 games with the 2-goal performance on Sunday. Let's start with Charlie Coyle. That line of him, Frederick, and Kastelic, I like that line. I think it was, I think Kastelic complements the two of them well. It kind of allows that line to be that big body forechecking puck possession line. I don't recall how often we've seen that combination in the past this season. I'm blanking on that, but this may have been the first game I noticed it for a long stretch.
I think it was definitely the first game that they started with it as a line. I think it's probably popped up a couple times here and there, mid-game changes. But this is definitely the longest run that it got.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a good line too. You're right, Kastelic does complement them well, and I thought it almost created a little bit of a Batch Brothers dynamic with Kastelic and Frederick on the 2 wings. I thought Frederick was noticeably more physical, and I'm maybe just the emotion of the day would have brought that out anyways. But I can't help but think that having Kastelic on the other wing helps that, and kind of brings that out of Frederick a little bit more. So yeah, that they were good, and as you said, Coyle scores twice. His second goal, Kastelic was actually in the penalty box for, serving at the end of a 10-minute misconduct. After getting into it midway through the second period in a scrum. So Cole Koepke was out for that, and Cole Koepke actually had the steal to set that goal up. So yeah, I thought the entire Bruins team honestly played pretty well. I don't know if I could even pick someone out who didn't play well, but I did think the bottom 6, because I thought the fourth line of Koepke, Beecher, and Mark McLaughlin getting back in, I thought that was a good line too. So just a good day up and down the lineup.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, in terms of individual plays, there's that were bad that I took note of, was the Laura turnover on the power play. That was the only one I really think I wrote down, because that was the only one that seemed a little bit important.
Zadorov had a really bad turnover trying to break out of the zone.
So just a few little blips.
Swayman gave up a soft goal, the third one from Montreal. But
yeah,
well, I thought a quiet line, if we're gonna talk about players who didn't, not that these guys didn't play well. I think that the Marchand, Lindholm, Brazeau line, maybe they have some advanced metrics that were in their favor, but just the eye test quickly looked like they had some chances. Brazeau had that chance all alone. I didn't love Marchand's penalty with about 10 minutes left in the game after Montreal made it 5-3. That's one of those situational awareness things where he needs to improve. So I didn't think that line had a great game. I thought they were just kind of out there. But yeah, everybody else I thought had a pretty solid game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that they were quiet for sure, and that was a dumb penalty, just slashing Newhook's stick right out of his hand. And he was so confused. He was like, "What? That doesn't make any sense. Why anyone would do that?" But to quickly,
I will say, quickly on that line, yes, that Marchand penalty was another bad play for sure. I thought Elias Lindholm was really good. I counted 3 separate times that he single-handedly killed a Montreal possession in the D zone, just with great closeouts on guys and taking the puck away. And I thought he popped up and was pretty active in the offensive zone as well. Brazeau had some good puck protection shifts. So yeah, that they definitely weren't as loud as the other lines, and they didn't score. But I still thought they had a pretty solid game, and Lindholm especially.
Yeah, and I want to quickly touch on the Kastelik thing with Frederick and Coyle. Kastelik can drive a line. Like, he drives the energy on the fourth line when he's on that line. I think he's the one that his emotion and his energy brings the level of that entire lineup. And I think that Coyle and Frederick are 2 guys that really need that to be infused into the way that they're playing. So putting Kastelik there makes all the sense in the world, because you got plenty of guys that can come up and play on the fourth line, but you're trying to get those 2 guys going. Coyle scores twice. That's great. Like you mentioned, Scotty, Kastelik assists on 1. I just think that line, like in the past, Frederick has been a very emotional, high energy player. It's not been there this season, at least not to the extent that it has been in the past. And you could say the same thing about Coyle. You feel at times that maybe confidence or energy, whatever it might be stemming from, has been lower out of those 2. And this is a good little kick, a little boost, because if he's driving play on that line, he's kind of pulling them into the fight as well. And we all know he likes to get into those fights. So I think I liked it. I think go with it going forward. Like, keep this going, because you can throw Johnson in somewhere else. I thought McLaughlin has played well, so like you could keep him in on the fourth line. But yeah, I like the combination.
Yeah, and Kastelik had a great forecheck on that first Coyle goal. Like, he sets up that whole thing.
After a goal, like Bridget, he was a third of that original fourth line this year that you talked about, where they're always on the ice after a goal. Like, Kastelik just seems to understand. There's an element to a player's game that you can't really. It's not part of their skill set. It's a part of their mentality, and it's the players that know that there's a time and a place. And Kastelik is one of those guys. Like, he recognizes there's a time and a place to not let down, and that's a good attribute to have. And it's another good point, Bridget, you make about like bringing that out of Coyle and Frederick. On the one hand, it's disappointing for me to feel like you have to have somebody bring emotion out of Trent Frederick or Charlie Coyle, but if that's the reality, that's the reality. I definitely think it's tough to be on a line with Mark Kastelik and not be engaged physically and mentally in the game, because he's going to drag it out of you. He's going to go net front, and he's going to force you into those scrums to defend them. So that alone is a really good point. And maybe Joe Sacco is looking at that exact metric and being like, this is a guy that's going to bring these guys into the fight every single game, and that's really smart.
It was funny, after the game, Kastelik was asked about the 10-minute misconduct, and is it hard to kind of get back into the flow of the game after missing that much time? And he was like, well, yeah, kind of, but I have some experience, so I've been there before.
For sure, he does, and he's been a good player for the Bruins. He's got up to 9 points on the year in 26 games. I think that's good for maybe 8th on the team in scoring, something like that. So another line that was got going early, which is the Pasternak, Zacha, Geeky line. Again, I don't know what to make of that line, other than I just don't love it. I'll never love it. I'll never love Geeky with Pasternak. I know they tried it at the end of the season last year and in the playoffs, and it was okay at times, but it's just not what you're looking for on paper to be playing with Pastrnak. However, they were able to get on the board, and David Pastrnak gets that goal. He causes the turnover. I think it was who was he forechecking? I forget who it was for the Canadians, but he forechecked the defenseman, stick lifted him, and was able to cause a turnover. And next thing you know, it's in the back of the net at the end of the sequence. The impact of David Pastrnak getting going, Bridget and Scott.
Yeah, and the goal that he scored too was just sticking to it. Like that wasn't the first shot in the sequence. He had another shot and then gets the rebound, and then there were a few rebounds, and on that shift in particular, Zacha helped generate some of those as well. But just sticking with it and coming up with those second efforts and third efforts and scoring that way. And if he keeps doing that, he's going to have more success than he has in the past. It was his 9th goal of the season today. It was good to see him get going. I also really liked how it was McAvoy and Pastrnak scoring first, the first 2 goals of the game. And I'm thinking to myself, these guys are wearing letters and they're coming and they're performing in a night that's really important, where you want to go out and not disappoint the alumni that are there and all of the people that helped to build the team to what it is and the culture. Like that takes it takes good leaders to get that, to kind of like wear off the rust, I guess, of sitting through the ceremony and everything, and then to start the team in the right direction on an important night, kind of like make an impact. It was nice to see both of those guys do it early.
Yeah, and the thing is, and like the problem with this team and what makes you hesitant to give out too much praise is we've seen this happen before, and then we've seen the letdown. We were singing those guys' praises after the comeback win in St. Louis as well, because they led that. McAvoy and Pastrnak took over in the 3rd period. And then they both had like a stretch of bad games after that, and the team had a stretch of bad games, and ultimately Montgomery got fired. And it's like, until I can see them do it for 3, 4, 5 straight games, like it's like, yeah, of course David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy are capable of stepping up against the Montreal Canadiens, a bad team. Like, of course they are. They should do it like every time they play a team like that. So yes, it's good that they did it on Sunday, and rose to the occasion. But it's got to happen more. And like I just find myself increasingly getting, like you can only get so excited because I've just seen this before, and I've seen the letdown after. And there needs to be like a stretch of like a couple weeks where there isn't that immediate letdown before I allow myself to think that this team or even any individuals have like actually turned the corner for real this time.
Scott, you're feisty today. First you boo Gary Bettman, and now this. Like you're trying to find a negative and a positive right now. I don't know.
Well, wait until we talk about the pregame ceremony, because I will be very positive about that.
Okay. All right, that's good.
Well, okay, so just to piggyback on what both of you guys were talking about, Bridget, you mentioned the leadership in this game in particular, and I agree with you.
I don't know if it's coming across, but like I'm kind of losing my voice, so I apologize if I sound weird.
You always sound weird.
Was it from booing? Was it from
yeah,
booing Bettman?
It was. I know. I booed Gary Bettman too hard.
Or Bridget, was he booing when McAvoy scored? I'm not really sure.
No, because McAvoy went to BU, so
that's right.
He would never do that.
No, that's right. So okay, look. So Scott, your point is not. It's understood by me. So like I hear where you're going with that, and I agree. As it pertains to this game in particular, I feel as though, just to be consistent, because I've been all over McAvoy and Pastrnak in particular this year, with what I think has been a lack of leadership. Like, I know Brad Marchand is still there, and that's great, but this has to be McAvoy and Pastrnak's team. This is, you talk about eras, right? Tonight was they honored a bunch of eras in Boston Bruins history. Well, we are embarking on the Pastrnak McAvoy era in Boston, and it started last year. It started with the retirement of Bergeron. For McAvoy, it started with the retirement of Chara, or him moving on and then eventually retiring. So it's been gradually happening, but this has to be their stamp. Like these next, let's call it the next decade. So from 2017 to into the 2030s, like that, like 10 to 15-year stretch, that will be the McAvoy Pastrnak era. And I just haven't been too impressed with their leadership, at least this year so far. To Scott's point, they show it, but in glimpses, but consistently, not even more nights than not, it's not there. So on a night like tonight, Bridget, I 1,000% agree. There was a lot of pressure on this game. Imagine if the Bruins went out there and through 40 minutes it's 0-0, right? Like that crowd is going to get restless. There's going to be some boo birds. People are going to be like, this is bullshit. This is the Centennial Game. Have a goddamn pulse, right? Those two players didn't let that happen. McAvoy controlled the game from the start to the finish, and Pastrnak was very good. So tonight they led by example, and I thought McAvoy was the star of the game. So that's great. But to Scott's point, okay, guys, now let's keep it going, because if you take steps backwards, there's no excuse for it. Like we're in December now. We're past the Thanksgiving mark. We're past the earliest season jitters. Like this is when this team has to start making ground and get themselves comfortably into that playoff, positioning. The season's here. This is we're embarking on mid-season now, so they got to get going here.
Yeah. And
I mean, after Friday night, they slipped down to 11th in the conference in points percentage. And Brian, like you mentioned in your opening shift, okay, 6 goals scored in 2 of the last 3 games. It's like, that's great. And I know it's against bad opponents, but, you have to, although I will say, like, the Islanders have been a pretty good team defensively this season. So that 6 was like a more legit 6 than Montreal, who's not very good at anything. But you just can't ignore that Friday in the middle where you're going against the worst defensive team in the NHL and you score 1 goal and just like got pretty badly outchanced in that game. Like got outplayed by the team that had the worst goal differential in the NHL and gave up chance after chance off the rush, odd man rushes. Like it was just a mess. Like there was no structure, very lackluster effort. And so it's like, yeah, 2 encouraging games here over the last 5 days or whatever, but also 1 just like absolute stinker right in the middle. So, they still got to find a way to like just not have those in between games. It can't be every other one. To your point, Brian, like you got to start actually, going on a bit of a run and getting some points and getting yourself in a playoff spot and putting some distance between you and teams that aren't really going to be in the playoff race. There's a few around you who probably are going to hang around. Like, Buffalo has looked pretty good. I have a lot of questions about them still, but they might hang around for a while. The Islanders might hang around for a while. Like
the good news is, I mean, obviously we're talking about putting up points against or 6 goals against a team that you kind of crushed on opening night. They're not the best. Like they kind of just, from watching them, they're very passive defensively. They just kind of let things happen occasionally, I guess would be the way to put it. So not surprising that the offense gets going against a team like that, but they're banking the points. They're in the playoffs right now. They need to continue to bank the points in the next 3 games because they got Detroit, they got Chicago, and they got Philadelphia. Those are winnable games. Those are teams that you shouldn't be scoring 1 goal against or no goals against. So that can continue. But Scott, you kind of dragged us off track for the thing that I wanted to bring up.
First off, I will just say, right now, technically on points percentage, they're still out.
Yes, on points percentage, but they're right there, and the point stands either way. These are the games that you need to get those points and hold on and win these games, because things do get harder in your schedule as the season goes on. There's a few difficult games that are coming up. Winnipeg won't be easy, but anyway, Brian, you mentioned that it's time for McAvoy and Pastrnak to be the leaders and to kind of have their voice be heard more, drive play. And I think that those two for sure. And I think it seems like the core will also include Swayman, right? Because you talk about like things changing over from Chara to McAvoy. Well, things have changed over from Tuukka to Swayman as well. So like you see that generational shift has happened in the past few years too, where obviously the big contracts that these guys got keeps them in Boston. Obviously you can get traded, whatever, but like those were the pieces that they're planning on building out around, it seems like. So yeah, that's another person just to bring up there.
No, it's a great call, Bridget.
And Swayman still has to get better. He still has to get going this season. Like, you know, everyone kind of got excited last week when he had, you know, I think 2 straight pretty good starts. And, you know, he talked about how he had a mini training camp and all that. Like, didn't think Swayman was very good on Sunday, honestly. He gave up 1 soft goal. I thought he could have had a shot at Montreal's second goal, although that was a really good shot from Heineman. But, you know, it's just like that game should have never even been close, right? Like that Montreal's second goal in the third period to cut it to 5-3. And all of a sudden you're like, no, crap, this is a hockey game again. And it really shouldn't have been. Like, you just got to get a save there, and it's still a 5-2 game. And that game really never should have been any closer than that.
I want to go back to McAvoy too, if I can, because that was the other thing I wanted to comment on, but got sidetracked. And what I wanted to say about McAvoy's goals was that those were 2 really, you know, goal scorers' goals. Like, he holds on to the puck for the wraparound, and he's able to beat Primo to the post, get the puck in. That's him taking initiative, driving deep into the offensive zone, going behind the net and trying the wraparound. And the fans were yelling, shoot, shoot, shoot. You know how they always do that. They're yelling shoot when he was like 20 feet out, but he does the right thing. He keeps driving. He you know, there's been times in the past where some of these guys that are snake bitten have been shooting from 20 feet out instead of taking the ice in front of them and doing what he did, which was getting himself heavily involved in the offense down low in the goal scoring areas. So that was really nice to see. And you don't very often see defensemen score on a breakaway. And so his shorthanded goal on a breakaway, I mean, he's the guy you want. If you're picking a defenseman to go on a breakaway, he's the one you want to do it. And he ended up finishing. And it's like, you think back, like Pastrnak has had a bunch of breakaways that he hasn't finished on. And then McAvoy goes down and he scores it. And yeah, so those were plays where he definitely asserted himself into the offense and showed his skill as well.
Totally. And I mentioned online, like the goals were great, and that's kind of gravy tonight. I thought that elsewhere he was just so dominant, and Scott's point earlier, he should be against this Canadiens team. But here's the thing. These guys are all professional hockey players. So it's and there's so much parity in the NHL. Like he should do it against the Canadiens, but you know, you're still going out there against a lot of talented guys, right? What I also loved was, he was controlling play. He was assertive with his feet. And he was also very territorial of the net front. And Kirby Dach in the third period, you know, little slash on Swayman's glove, and McAvoy without hesitation slashes him back. Scrum ensues. Like that's the mindset that you have to have as a defenseman. No nonsense. No no tummy sticks, no arm around the shoulder of the guy you're playing. No, he hacks your goalie, you hack him, and you throw the first jab. And if you get sent to the box, not great, but at the same time, like that's sometimes you go to the box when you're playing hard style of hockey. And I was glad to see that. One thought on Swayman, Scott, since you brought him up, I really would love. You brought him up. Thank you, Bridget. But Scott was saying that he needed to be better. So that made me think of this. One thing that I've noticed about him this year in particular, but I guess if I play it back, he's always been like this a little bit, but he needs to stop watching Jordan Binnington tape and wanting to fight guys constantly, because this is, again, I mentioned it before with Mark Kaslick. There's a time and a place for things, and I'm not saying for Swayman to not have the edge that he plays with, but you have to not get distracted, because he very much got distracted against Pittsburgh, and that led to the game-winning goal. And it's like, Jeremy, just take it easy a little bit with the shoulder, the blocker shoves, and just play goalie. Focus on playing net. I love the passion, but
what you're referring to is when he hit Suzuki, right? Because he had a nice clean shot.
Yeah, but it's just been something he's been doing all year. He's getting himself. He's maybe it's a way to keep himself engaged at times, but it's like when the play's in your D zone. At least the Suzuki one, like the play went down the ice. The one against Pittsburgh, it's like there's very much play going on in and around your net. Like Pittsburgh has the puck in the slot, and you're getting back to position because you were just kind of going at it for no reason. He has to tone it back a little bit. That's all I'm saying.
There have been good goalies that knew how to do it well, though. Like if you think back to like Carey Price in his prime, he was whacking people all the time, and and Henrik Lundqvist, like those guys did that.
Always, he should always be using his stick. Like I will never say not to, hit a guy in the back of the legs when he's trying to screen you. The stick work is one thing, because it doesn't take you out of position much. But when he's lunging his body at guys and getting in their face, like, again, you just have to know when you can and can't do that. And I just feel like he's got to figure that out.
Yeah, like there's times where he like steps out to the top of the crease to do it, or to the side of the crease, and it's like that involves like actual body movement. The stick poke, like you can just reach out with your stick, and you're not moving anything else. So yeah, that definitely, like I'm glad you brought that goal against Pittsburgh, because like that bothered me, and I was like, yeah, like when you watch it, it's like, okay, yes, he had time to reset, but you shouldn't even need to be resetting. Like you should already be set. Like there shouldn't need to be any recovery time, because he shouldn't have been coming out to jab a guy with the blocker in the first place. So yeah, and again, it kind of just feeds into, the other goal in the Pittsburgh game wasn't good either. He gets caught, his skate just like misses the near post. He gets caught over committing, and then he's stuck and just like way out of position. So, I would say after like the sort of the positive feelings people were starting to have about Swayman last week, I would say back to back 2 straight games now that would leave me wondering, just how much that mini training camp actually fixed, and how much more there is still to go for him.
Yeah, and I get the sense that the mini training camp, so to speak, was more of a mental thing than anything else. And so yeah, and in that one where he just somehow ended up not pushing off the post, he was like halfway into his net, like his legs were in the net awkwardly, and he doesn't slide over. So yeah, that wasn't good against Pittsburgh. I agree. I think that his personality is, he's kind of an intense person. So like with Brad Marchand, it's probably hard to, keep himself contained. I think we're all pretty sure that he's going to have a fight at some point in his career. It's gonna happen. I'm not saying it's gonna be goalie on goalie. Like he could just grab someone and just go for it. I think was it his first game of the season that he came in and he tried to fight them? Anyway, he comes close. He probably will get there. in his career, if not this season.
Yeah, I'd rather him try to win a Vezina before he gets in a fight, though. I mean, like I said, I love the fire, I love the passion, but it has to be within control. I mean, I mentioned the Jordan Binnington highlights. You can, if he wants to watch Jordan Binnington highlights from Game 7 of 2019, go for it. But the extracurriculars, it's very easy for a goalie to get. Here's the thing: players around the league will pick up on that, and they'll realize that getting Swayman's grill, and he'll lose focus, and you can't allow yourself to become a bulletin board material for an opponent. Like you have to have composure. And right now, if I'm an opponent of the Bruins, I'm telling any agitators on my team or just anybody in general, get in his face. If Swayman's playing well, get under his skin a little bit, get him off his game. Get him thinking about you instead of the puck, and that just can't be something that a goalie can allow his opponents to have on him.
Yeah, I agree. Do you guys have anything else about the game, or do we want to just shift gears to? Just
quickly, actually, Bridget, you had something?
Yeah, it actually wasn't about the game. It was about the pregame. And this is something that Rich Keefe reported already, that, Lindholm was going to be out several weeks, but somebody asked.
Hampus Lindholm.
Hampus Lindholm. Yes, sorry. 2 Lindholms this year. Sacco was asked about it before the game, and he said he's still out several weeks away from coming back. Just an injury update, I guess, to get everybody, like, it's confirmed by Sacco at this point. So
the last thing that I had, Scott, was I just wanted to make this note as well. Bruins are now 4-2 under Joe Sacco as head coach. Heading into Sunday's game, I believe in the time frame that Sacco has been their head coach, I think the Bruins have been the best defensive team in the league. I know they give up 3 goals to the Canadiens on Sunday, and I know it's a very short sample, but that's worth bringing up that, the Bruins defensively have started to rein it in under Sacco. Offensively, clearly they've still been struggling. Now, there's been a Jekyll and Hyde nature the last 3 games, 6 goals, 1-6. And I think the reason that you get that is for a couple of reasons. Number one, yeah, the Islanders are okay defensively, but some weak opponents. Okay, they're not playing Florida or Carolina putting up these goal amounts, and I think it kind of speaks to the lack of the Bruins roster right now's ability to have a scoring by committee roster. Like if you look at their look at Elias Lindholm's game log, for example, you'll see that in his last 6 games he has 4 points. 2 of those games he had points. He had 3 points against the Islanders. He had 1 point against Utah. But his game log over the last 11 games, again, still just 2 games with points. And that can be said for a lot of players. You look at their game logs for the last 10 games, and a lot of these guys, it's 0 points or 1 point in the last 10 games or something like that. You need to have your top guys, like your secondary scoring top guys, like your Coyles, your Zakas, your Lindholms. You don't need them scoring 2-3 points every night, but you need them scoring 2 points every 3 games, or just consistent throughout the year. And right now, the Bruins just don't have that. They haven't had that, despite having 6 goals 2 of the last 3 games. Their inability to have consistent scoring. I know everybody knows this, but that has to improve. And that's something where these 2 games with 6 goals don't make me feel any better, because it just tells me you had a couple of guys with multi-points against some weaker teams. I still need to see, these players scoring consistently over a stretch of 10 games. Your Coyles, your Zakas, your Lindholms, those guys should have 4 points every 4 to 6 points every 10 games. If you want them to be produce at what this Bruins team hopes for them to do.
Yeah, at this point, it's like you would take half a point a game from most of those guys, and on the season, you're definitely not getting that. You're right. Since Sacco took over, Bruins are number 1 in goals allowed, best defensive team, 21st in scoring, even with now the 2 6-goal games. So, just tells you how quiet the other games have been. which has been a problem all season. I mean, 21st is actually a big upgrade over 32nd, which is where they were, like right after Sacco took over. So, like you said, like you need, can you at least have like 2 or 3 lines going pretty well each game? Because the Bruins have had way too many games where no lines going, or early in the season only the 4th line is going. So Sunday, was at least encouraging in the sense that every line I thought had chances and had some offensive zone shifts, and that starts to bleed together and carry over, and each line can build on the one before it. That just has not happened nearly enough. So even outside of the points, it's just like flow of the game stuff where, if you have multiple lines going, you can start to build momentum in a game. Whereas if you only have one line going, then it's like, okay, then the other 3 shifts in between, you're handing momentum to the other team. So, like Sunday, a step for them, but needs to happen much more consistently.
All right. Well, I think that can probably get us right into the Centennial game ceremonies. Bridget's got really, really cool day. It started really yesterday on Saturday with the unveiling of that Bruin statue, that bear statue outside TD Garden. And there were some speeches from Charlie Jacobs, Neely, some other individuals spoke. And then obviously it continued into Sunday with a full, 45-ish minute ceremony at the Garden around 3:00. Puck dropped after 4. Very, very special. All, Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, Rick Middleton. Terry O'Reilly, the list goes on. Willie O'Ree, Bergeron. Just, there could have been others.
Jason Allison.
How can I forget Jason Allison? A notable player that was not there. I'm sure they tried, but maybe there was some reasons behind it. No Zdeno Chara, at least in the ceremony. Maybe he was around the arena somewhere. But Bridget Scott, what stood out to you from the day's festivities and just some of your favorite moments?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was getting to talk to some of those guys before the game, which is just always, it's always an awesome opportunity. And the first 2 guys we got to talk to were Patrice Bergeron and Ray Bourque. And again, I apologize for my voice. But
your voice cracked, and I cracked a smile.
Well, hey, listen, puberty comes for all of us at some point. So
it's a little late.
Yeah,
unless you're secretly 14 years old.
So see, I just can't get over how demonic that laugh was from Bridget.
Now if I laugh, it's going to get worse. So we started with Bergeron and Ray Bourque, which is great, but like obviously, we covered Bergeron, and you still see him from time to time. Not saying that's not special. Bourque, get to talk to a little less, but like he's still around. He spends a lot of time in Boston, obviously runs Tresca in the North End. But then we also got to talk to Johnny Busick and Willie O'Ree, and that's, we got to see them both in recent years with the Centennial stuff last year. Obviously, Willie O'Ree's number was retired a few years ago now, just after the pandemic. But seeing those guys back, like they're both 89 years old and still moving around, still able to get out to this game, and that's just really cool. Like it's cool to be standing there talking to those guys, and to see them out in the ice, and just to see what it means to them, because I would say since Milt Schmidt passed away, it's like Busick probably stands as sort of the grandfatherly face of the Boston Bruins that everyone looks up to. Even your Bobby Orrs and Phil Espositos, because Busick was the veteran on those teams, and at times the official captain, at times de facto captain, because they didn't actually have an official captain. But like, he was always the leader for them, so like they still look up to him that way. And then obviously the history that Willie O'Ree made and the role that he has played in promoting the game of hockey to different communities now going on, 30 years that he's had that role, is really cool. And like, I think, I think you see guys like on the team who, even younger players now who like really look up to them and recognize that those are legends.
Yeah, I think it was cool to hear Willie O'Ree say that he's like, I've been set for life. Like, he's a Bruin for life. Like, they've been nothing but good to him throughout the years, and he's still like, they still involve him and make him feel like he's a big part of what helped build the foundation and an important piece of in their legacy. So it was cool to hear him. I wanted to ask him, but I didn't get the chance to, because he works with Hockey is for Everyone, which works with diversity and including with women's hockey. And I know that I'm fairly certain he's been involved in some of the PWHL stuff as well, trying to promote the women's side of the game. So I wish I had gotten a chance to ask him that. I kind of chickened out. I don't know. Like, sometimes I get around these people and I get like the legends of hockey, and I kind of get shy. So I didn't ask him, but it was nice to see him. And it's funny, Ray Bork can tell a story. He went on for like some of his answers. Like, he told like from start to finish these stories about his playing days and the history and with the Montreal Canadiens and growing up in Quebec and then becoming, a Bruin and all of this stuff. So it did make you think, because a lot of questions were asked about the rivalry, just how much it's gone away. So that's an unfortunate thing, and it'll come back. It's always going to be on the back burner, even when the teams are not at the same level competition wise. But it does kind of stink that rivalry has lessened since 2011, like 10 years ago, I guess you say, like the cup winning team and the teams that were, it seemed like they're playing Montreal in the playoffs all the time previously, but that's, since Montreal hasn't been a playoff team, the rivalry's kind of disappeared.
You add to that the fact that the NHL has changed their divisional alignments. Not that the Bruins and Canadiens aren't still in the same division, but they also make it so that every NHL team plays every other team at least twice, even out of conference. And so now you go from playing 8 times a year down to 6 times a year, and then now down to 3 times a year. So, tonight actually it was one of those games where maybe there's a lot of juice in the arena, but there was some animosity out there, and it's like, oh, it'd be great to see these guys play each other, 6 times, 6 more times. But nope, they get one more game against each other in Montreal at some point this season.
It's all the way in April, so it's a long time.
So that, in addition to the teams being in opposite directions in the last decade plus, like, it's really just been the lack of games on the schedule. In particular, when COVID happened, and I mentioned this before on the podcast, but when COVID happened, you had nearly a 2-year stretch, calendar year stretch, between Bruins and Canadiens games, because the 2019-2020 season, the end of it was canceled. Then you had the bubble playoffs, and then the following year you had a realignment with the Canadian division that the Bruins obviously weren't in. And then the following year, I think they may have played each other like months into the season. So it's just been an infrequent game, honestly, in recent years. But good to see an entertaining product tonight. And my biggest takeaway from the ceremony was just how special it is that different generations of Bruins fans, parents and their kids, being able to see iconic players over decades and decades. Call it what it is, a century. I'm just, I'm not as familiar with the first half of the Bruins history, but certainly the second half. I mean, I am, but to an extent. But the second half, you realize, like, when I think about the Bruins of the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, as somebody born in the 90s, you sometimes tend to like lump those teams together because there was a lot of carryover. Like Bork played across 2 decades. Wayne Cashman played with Bork, or I'm sorry, with Orr before Orr, and I think he also played with Bork. Like there's a lot of like cross era players that the Bruins had, but to go from Bobby Orr and the Big Bad Bruins to then the next era of players with Terry O'Reilly and Rick Middleton, um, like all the way through the Neely and Bork days, and then obviously like the 2000s with Chara, Bergeron, and it's just been. Yes, there's only 6 championships in 100 years, and that might be a little light for a lot of Bruins fans liking, and I get that. But if we're talking character of individuals that have worn the spoked B, yeah, it's really impressive, and so that was just really cool to see all the eras being honored and coming out. And you have people in the arena. You could have somebody in the arena that's been watching the Bruins for a year. You could have somebody that has been watching the Bruins since the 50s, 60s. Like, so not all Bruins fans are created equal, and it's really cool that every Bruins fan as an individual has their own memories depending on how far back they've been watching the team, and that's just really cool to see.
Yeah, and like kind of tying into my opening shift, like it's also a reminder that obviously, yes, everyone wants to win a cup, and it's disappointing when someone doesn't. It's disappointing when Ray Bourque has to go elsewhere to do it. But it's a reminder that like you can be loved in this city, and a whole team can be loved in this city without winning the cup. Like if you play the right way and play a style that this city wants to see and this fan base wants to see, and you go on some runs, like even if you ultimately come up short, yeah, people will be pissed in the moment and disappointed, but ultimately, like that effort is appreciated. And the like those lunch pail AC teams of the late 70s didn't win the cup, but are still beloved because of how they played and because of the fact that they took the Canadiens dynasty to 7 games, and we're right there. The Bork Neely teams of the late 80s and early 90s, they didn't win, but they got to the cup twice, and they played a style that people love to watch. And was exciting and like gave people something to cheer for. And I think it's again to kind of like yes, obviously everyone, Brian, you talked about the McAvoy Pasternak era. Like obviously the expectation and the hope is that they are going to win a cup at some point. Like that has to be the expectation. But you only give yourself a chance to do that if you're doing everything the right way leading up to that. And ultimately, like if you come up short, but you're playing hard and like you go on good runs and win some games that maybe you're not supposed to win, like that will be appreciated. And you could, when you watch those highlights that they showed today, it's like, yeah, like they showed the teams that won the cups, absolutely. But so many of those highlights are from teams and players who didn't, but who just played the right way and like gave fans something to cheer about and rally behind. And I think that just remains like just the baseline of what is expected, because as much as Bruins fans over the decades have been disappointed not to win more cups, there's also an element of like being spoiled because the team has been in the playoffs like almost every year. Like just very few years that the Bruins have missed the playoffs going back 50 plus years.
They've been 77 times in their history.
Yeah. So it's like, you gotta at least do that. You gotta at least get there and be a part of it and be right in the middle of it. Which is where, some of the frustration really starts with this year's team, because people see them, in or out of the playoffs, on the bubble, whatever, fighting for a spot and knowing that like this team should be better than that, and should not be fighting all season just to get in the playoffs. Like that should be kind of like the baseline for what this team can do.
Yeah, and I also, it doesn't hurt that a lot of the teams still were entertaining. And Scott, I think you said this during the video. It was like there was one whole era that was just like, I swear they didn't even show a goal highlight. It was just fists flying. Like it was just, and it was you'll be loved if you just hop over the glass and beat up some fans with with their own shoe. That obviously made the montage, but yeah, like there was some craziness. There's some like relatability, I think, between the city and the style of play and the guys that were on the team too.
Bridget and Scott, if you'll indulge me for about 2.5 minutes here, Bridget, I know you're tired, but we have to get to the uniforms, shall we? Scott, you made a comment when they debuted these in a Twitter video a ways back. You had to see them on the ice. Now that you've seen them on the ice, Scott and Bridget, how do you feel about the Centennial jerseys the Bruins wore against the Canadians? And you can make a few modifications if you'd like, but thoughts on if they should make these a permanent look going forward beyond this season?
So overall, I really like them. I'll give them, I'm going to say an A-. I do think the back of them, when you see them live in the building, and I'm going to guess it comes across the same way on TV, too similar to a Penguins jersey.
So similar.
Yeah. Like, I really think the nameplate with just the gold lettering with no outline, no white outline, I feel like that kind of is like the part that really matches way too much with the Penguins. So I would make tweaks to the back of the jersey to make it less Penguins like, and I know that the counter is, well, that they were the Bruins colors first, right? Like this was always a thing with Jeremy Jacobs and Harry Sinden, was that like the Penguins stole the Bruins colors. And it's like, all right, sure. But like also the Penguins have now had that style in terms of what the nameplate and number looks like, for a little bit. Like that they had a different color gold in between, but like they've had that for these last however many years, I don't know, 10 years or whatever, and they had it in the era right before that as well. So I would like to see that tweaked a little. The front is money. Like that's fresh. Like that, it looked really good. Some of the things I was concerned about, I no longer am, which was like the yellow going all the way down to the end of the sleeves or the black at the top of the socks. Don't care about those. Like looked good live. Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I thought so. I don't know if I said this at the time, but my response to you about the yellow sleeves going all the way to the bottom was, I was gonna say, Scott, I don't know.
First, you fought me for like 45 minutes.
Yes, but yeah, I did. But we figured out what the miscommunication was, and I will aware that it was because of me. But I was gonna say not to worry about the sleeves going all the way down to the bottom with yellow, because the black gloves, they're gonna be tucked into the black gloves, and the black gloves gives you a final layer of black. So like it wouldn't look like somebody walking around the concourse with the jersey, because it would get covered up a little bit, and I think that was shown. Yeah, the whole Penguins thing, like I get it, because people say the colors are the same, and yeah, the nameplates were pure yellow, but at least, Scott, I'm glad you were willing to admit that the Bruins had that color scheme first, and but it's the striping pattern is totally different. Like it's a very distinct Bruins striping pattern that they've always had in one way, shape, or form. But yes, I will concede that like the name being purely yellow is Pittsburgh-esque. Yeah. But that's so for those listening, they can't see, but on YouTube, Bridget is showing a picture. You see what I mean, Scott? Like the piping is just much different. It's not, you know what I mean? But yes, the nameplate is pretty much exact.
Like honestly, if you just put some white trim around the yellow in the name, like that alone might solve it. Like that might be all I need.
Yeah, the font. I mean, it's all similar, but only from the back. Obviously, the front looks good, and that's a keeper. I don't really know what you can change on the back though. Like, there's only so much you can do on that side. It's all pretty standard. So
yeah, I think it would just be, I think the nameplate having a white outline around a name, instead of it just being purely yellow, is I think what Scott was calling for. And then I know others were saying that the collar has a little too much yellow, so maybe thin out the collar, more black. But would you guys like to see that this look or a close look to this as their permanent look going forward? Obviously, they would have a white to match. I think it would look amazing. I think it would be the perfect uniforms to bring them into the next 100 years, at least to start. I'm sure they would get changed at some point down the line. Pete Blackburn mentioned to us a couple of years ago that he was hearing whispers then that this is what the Bruins were going to do, and I think that is, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, but I do think that this will be something that they consider going forward. I could see them. Sometimes you've seen teams in the past have a third jersey that hits so hard. They're not allowed to make it their new home jersey in season, but teams are allowed, if they make the playoffs, they are allowed to decide on a home jersey for the playoffs. It just has to stick the whole time. So like in the past, you've seen the Washington Capitals one year. I think they went to the 90s Capitals, like the red, white, and blue stars as their postseason jerseys. You could see the Bruins maybe doing that.
Carolina's done it a bunch.
Yeah, the Hurricanes are an example as well. So you've seen teams pick a jersey for the postseason. So maybe the Bruins could do that if they qualify, and then next season maybe they'll have a total rebrand. But I liked it.
Hey, they won, so maybe they're good luck.
Yeah, I liked it. I would absolutely be in favor of a switch to, like I said, this with just slight modification. But yeah, permanent rebrand away from what they have now, which like I like the design that they have now. Like absolutely don't dislike it at all, but I do like this jersey better.
There aren't many designs you could show me where I would say to change the Bruins' current uniform designs. The logo, the logo is a little bit busy, but there's not many designs that I would say change over the current Bruins uniforms. What we saw tonight is without a doubt one of the ones that I would be in favor of.
I will say, like someone's brought this up. I've seen people mention this before, but it is like a little weird that the Bruins have kind of had as many rebrands as they have when you look at other original six teams that pretty much never rebrand. Like Canadians have, with only very slight modifications, had like the same jersey forever. The Maple Leafs have had a couple slight rebrand, like the Leaf itself has been modified a couple times. The Red Wings have never changed. Like they've been the same. The Rangers have been the same for a very long time.
Same with the Blackhawks.
Blackhawks, yeah, definitely. So it is a little weird that it's like it seems like every, I don't know what, 15 to 20 years. Well, maybe every 20 there's like a permanent rebrand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Maple Leafs they were a casualty of the 07 Reebok uniform alterations, but the Red Wings, the Blackhawks, the Rangers, and the Canadians, they just stayed true right through the Reebok experience. The Bruins actually went from, the Joe Thornton, Sergei Samsonov uniforms to the ones that they kind of currently wear, minus the black socks, with the Reebok change. I think that was a change for the better. I think most would agree with that. But yeah, it is interesting, Scott. Yeah, I know they do change them up a lot. I mean, just how many uniforms have they worn in the last two plus seasons alone? Like they had an entire new slate for the Centennial season last year. So
Meth Bear, Pooh Bear, a different color gold with sparkles for the Centennial year.
Yep.
The original bear, like that's in like the arch.
Yep.
A lot
Yep.
of different stuff going on. You guys
All
and your
right.
fashion segments. You guys.
I can go
you know.
forever.
Yeah, I know.
I can go-
I was like,
name
this
me
is longer than 2.5 minutes, Brian.
Name me a team and a year, and I'll tell you what uniforms they wore. I've always been obsessed with them since I was younger. Okay. Well, I think that probably wraps it up, Bridget Scott. So looking ahead to this week's slate of games, you have the Red Wings on Tuesday, Blackhawks Wednesday, and then they're off until Saturday against the Flyers. So obviously you're listening to this on Monday, maybe a Wednesday and a Friday recording like usual. Get back on our normal schedule if we can.
Yeah, I think that works. Or unless we help till Thursday, but doesn't matter to me. I'm around.
Okay. All right. Well, thank
You're
you
not
all very
going
much.
anywhere special? You're not taking a quick trip to Cancun or something?
Nope, not for me.
Cancun would lead to sugary alcoholic beverages, Bridget, and that would lead to a raspy voice. And that is not something Scott wants on this podcast because you won't let him forget it. So hopefully we'll hold off on the Cancun for Scott this week. But thank you all very much for listening. Hope you all enjoy the Centennial game, and we'll talk to you throughout the rest of the week. Hey guys, thanks for watching this Skate podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.